Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Robert Allen, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Navy is Lieutenant Tony Marr. Today, we commemorate the 80th anniversary of Operation Freshman, a top-secret British airborne mission conducted in November 1942. On the 19th of November 1942, two Halifax bombers, each towing a Horsa glider, took off from Scotland. On board each glider were specially trained Royal Engineers and pilots. 5 members of the Royal Australian Air Force also took part in this top-secret mission to destroy the Norsk hydro plant in Norway, denying the Germans the heavy water required to develop nuclear weapons. Navigating by map and compass in terrible weather, the air crews were unable to find the landing zone and reluctantly turned for home. On the return journey, ice built up on the tow cables, and the cable between Halifax A and its glider snapped, and the glider crashed in a steep mountain valley. It killed 8 men on impact. 4 wounded men were murdered by the Gestapo over the following days, and 5 remaining survivors were sent to a nearby concentration camp and eventually executed by firing squad. Those on glider B and its tow plane fared little better. After being separated, both glider and Halifax crashed near Helleland in northwest Norway. The 7-man crew of the Halifax were killed instantly on impact. 3 men aboard glider B were killed during the crash, and 14 survivors surrendered. They were executed by firing squad later that day. Due to the secrecy surrounding the mission, very little information was provided to the families of the servicemen at the time, other than that they were missing. This evening, the last post ceremony will remember and pay tribute to Pilot Officer Herbert John Fraser, who was killed during the operation. This evening, we warmly welcome Group Captain Ernie Walsh, President of the Air Force Association, ACT Division. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Return and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the pool of the reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem. If able, please be seated. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today, we remember and pay tribute to Pilot Officer Herbert John Fraser. Herbert Fraser was born on the 18th of March 1914, the son of Herbert and Ida Fraser of Bendigo, Victoria. He grew up in Bendigo, where he attended Bendigo High School and went on to work as a clerk and driver for his father's transport business, a small delivery firm that operated locally and between Bendigo and Melbourne. Affectionately known as Bert, he was a keen boxer, setting up a basic gym and boxing bag in his backyard shed. Having enrolled in the RAAF Reserve in May 1940, Herbert Fraser was called up, and on the 1st of March 1941, he enlisted in the Royal Australian Air Force. Not long after enlisting, on the 26th of April 1941, Bert Fraser married Alva Bayer in Bendigo. Their time together would have been limited as Fraser became involved in training as a pilot. He attempted elementary flying training school in Tasmania and service flight training school in Wagga Wagga. Before departing for Europe, he was given 9 days pre-embarkation leave. It would be the last time that Bert and Elva saw each other. Herbert Fraser embarked for overseas service at Newcastle on the 17th of November 1941. As part of the Empire Air Training Scheme, he was one of almost 27,500 RAAF pilots, navigators, wireless operator, air gunners and flight engineers who, throughout the course of the war, joined Royal Air Force squadrons or Australian squadrons based in Britain. Arriving in the United Kingdom on the 24th of February 1942, Fraser was posted to No. 1 Glider Training School, based at RAF Thame in Oxfordshire. Here he learnt to fly the small, troop-carrying Hotspur glider. In mid-April, he transferred to No. 102 Glider Operational Training Unit, based at RAF Gidlington in Oxfordshire. Fraser's daughter, Jean Margaret, was born on the 17th of April 1942. She would never meet her father. On the 4th of June, Fraser joined 296 Squadron, RAF, a transport squadron concentrating on glider training. And in August, he was posted to the Glider Pilot Exercise Unit, based at RAF Nether Avon. In October, Fraser and fellow Australian pilot officer Norman Arthur Davies were chosen to take part in Operation Freshman, a top-secret mission to destroy the Norsk hydro plant in Norway. This mission intended to deny the Germans the heavy water required to develop a nuclear weapon. A glider-borne landing would be attempted on a landing zone 5 hours marching distance away from their objective. The gliders would be guided to the landing zone, then Norwegian glides would lead them to their objective. Fraser and his comrades began training for their mission immediately. As well as practicing daylight and nighttime tows, consumption and loading tests and equipment tests, there was special ground training. The pilots were to act as soldiers after landing. By mid-November, the gliders had moved to RAF Skitton in Scotland, where planning continued. Weather reports were unfavourable, but after the report of the 19th of November, it was decided to go ahead. It was unlikely that the weather would improve, and the operation was too important to be abandoned. That evening, 2 Halifax bombers, each towing a Horsa glider, took off. On board each glider were specially trained Royal Engineers and pilots. Navigating by map and compass in terrible weather, the air crews were unable to find the landing zone and reluctantly turned for home. On the return journey, however, ice built up on the tow cables. Over southwest Norway, the cable between Halifax A and its glider snapped, and the glider crashed in a steep mountain valley. Of the 17 men on board glider A, 8 were killed on impact. 4 men who had been badly injured by the crash were murdered by the Gestapo over the following days. Their bodies were weighted down with rocks and dumped at sea. The 5 remaining survivors were held in Gestapo prison before being transported to the concentration camp at Grini near Oslo. On the 19th of January 1943, they were transported to Trandum Wood, north of Oslo, where they were executed by firing squad. Those on Glider B and its tow plane fared little better. After being separated, both Glider and Halifax crashed near Helleland in southwest Norway. The 7-man crew of the Halifax, including pilot officer Herbert Fraser and fellow Australian pilot officer Norman Davies, were killed on impact. Herbert Fraser was 28 years old. 3 men aboard Glider B were killed during the crash, and 14 survivors surrendered. They were executed by firing squad later that day. The bodies of the men were buried that evening in an unmarked grave. A local Norwegian civilian secretly observed the burial and was later able to tell authorities where the men were buried. Due to the secrecy surrounding the mission, very little information was provided to the families of the servicemen at the time, other than that they were missing. It was not until the end of the war that the story would be revealed. Today, Herbert Fraser's remains lie buried in Eganez churchyard in Stavanger, Norway. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. Pilot Officer Fraser is pictured among the group portrait of RAAF airmen that is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Pilot Officer Herbert John Fraser, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozières or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you.